Welcome to Cyber Leaders with me, Ciaran Martin.
And me, James Line. Now, we're both from the SANS Institute who are kindly backing this podcast. I myself am a techie, a massive geek, and I've spent my life chasing cybercriminals around the internet.
I did some stuff too. I dealt with cybersecurity policy in government and set up the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre. And now James and I are teaming up to unpack for you the weird, wacky, wired and wireless world of tech security and all the complicated things that it involves.
That's right, Ciaran. This podcast is a voice for security leaders. We want CISOs, security directors and beyond to build up their knowledge of what works, what doesn't, and ultimately to secure their organizations more comprehensively and quickly, and ideally make life a little bit miserable for cyber criminals on the way.
Go us!
Now, Ciaran, today it's time for something a bit different.
That's great. Very exciting. So something different. So you're going to stick to the script, keep on time, not mention T-shirts, let me sing without interruption?
Of course, none of those things are true.
Oh.
Apart from the strict no singing rule. That has to remain in enforcement. I don't want any complaints or referrals to Ofcom. For non-UK listeners, that's our communications regulator, which I suspect Ciaran is already a regular offender with them.
Free speech.
But apart from that, it's business as usual.
Free speech. I'm taking my campaign to Congress. Well, okay, if it's not that, what is different?
Well, it's the topic, actually.
Oh, tell us more, James.
Well, to be specific, it's about the specifics.
You're speaking in riddles again.
One of my favourite pastimes, a protocol embedded in a protocol. Look, it's just sometimes when you wander off into all generalities, sometimes in this business of cybersecurity, you need to be specific. You've got to understand what's really going on. You've got to be forensic in nature, even.
Oh, okay, I see. I'm not sure I can help with that. Do you need me for this conversation? Can I have the day off?
Well, despite my temptation to agree just to see what would happen and maybe try and replace you with some sort of AI that will also be forbidden from singing.
It's a matter of time.
It wouldn't be the same without you, Ciaran.
Oh, shucks.
But we might need someone else.
I think we do need someone, well, forensic, or at least someone who understands this thing called digital forensics.
Yes, I don't think it would be the same without you, but we might need someone else.
Yeah, don't rely on me.
Yeah, so, well, luckily we don't have to, Ciaran.
Oh, good.
That would indeed be terrible, although I would love to see you do a bit of forensics at some point.
Nope.
Instead, given that we're going to focus on digital forensics today, we're going to bring in, as a guest, one of the absolute rock stars of the digital forensics world. Now, a litany of titles and accomplishments to be listed here, but a few reasons of the many to listen to her. She's the Senior Director of Forensic Research at Cellebrite. Here at the SANS Institute, she's the Digital Forensics and Incident Response Curriculum Lead and a course author, amongst other things. So spending tons of time with students, teaching them the latest interesting things that are happening in the world of forensics, sharing stories from particularly high-profile cases across a lot of forensics, but in particular known for smartphone forensics. I have reason to believe recently I should also be slightly terrified of her ability to examine Windows and might have to start hiding other devices. She's also our head of faculty, so she organises our lineup of world-class practitioners at SANS across every cybersecurity discipline. A big job indeed. Now, these titles aside, which are certainly impressive, much more than that, let's talk about the reasons you should listen to her, some of her accomplishments. She's worked on some of the most stressful and important national security and criminal cases involving digital forensics this century, ranging from Osama bin Laden's media use, yes, you heard that right, to horrific cases of child exploitation and, very recently, multiple murders. A sombering reminder of the life and limb impact of what happens in cybersecurity and the importance of these skills. Yet, in addition to dealing with all these difficult and horrible cases, she is a remarkable advocate for excellence in cybersecurity, for diversity in the profession, and has been both a mentor and an inspiration to countless cybersecurity professionals. You must have whittled it down by now, Ciaran. Of course, it can only be the eponymous, brilliant Heather Barnhart. Welcome.
Welcome, Heather. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. James, you made me feel old with the century comment. I was like, ooh, that one's scary.
That was a Dorian Gray reference, really. I think we all know you have a painting somewhere.
It's a young century. We're only a quarter of the way through.
It's true. You know what's crazy? I was thinking tomorrow is 24 years since 9/11. I'm like, how is that possible? 24?
Oh,
Yeah.
that made me feel very old.
Right?
Very old indeed. And you think back over all that time, the number of new devices, new technologies, new technological enhancements, simpler times back then. And now look at what we're carrying around in our pockets. And you can tell us more about that later in the podcast.
Before we get into that, because the digital age is quite young, look, we always start with everybody, no matter what they're going to talk to us about. And we've got some fascinating things to cover with you. But we always talk about your journey into the profession. How did you end up as a cybersecurity expert? What's your story? I understand you started with the US military, not as a computer security specialist. Is that right? And how did you end up as an expert in this field?
So not exactly. Yes and no.
Okay.
I grew up really coming from not much. My dad raised my brother and I, so tuition for college was a problem.
Right.
I joined the Air Force to pay 100% of my tuition. So that was before 9/11. That I thought 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, no problem. Pretty easy.
Age of peace, all of that, yeah?
Yeah. My senior year of college, 9/11 happened, and then all the activations occurred.
Wow.
So the military played a role in putting me in the right place at the right time. I was flying on the back of a C-130.
Right.
I didn't have a job. I was actually doing paraffin hand dips in a hair salon, and my dad was losing his mind because I was a college graduate with this fancy forensic science degree.
Right.
And the loadmaster, proper term for him in the Air Force, said, "Hey, are you that forensic girl? You can do forensics, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do anything. I need a job." And he said, "Well, what about computer forensics?" And I was like, "Ooh, I don't really do computers, but I know bloodstain pattern analysis. I know latent fingerprints." And he's like, "Why don't you just interview?" And I interviewed. 23 and a half years later, here I am doing computers.
That's brilliant. So you did forensics and then you added digital to it.
I did.
Fantastic.
And one still has to use bleach for these activities today quite often as well, I believe.
Exactly.
But look, let me be even more simplistic in my questioning than the loadmaster who said, "Are you that forensics girl?" Let's pretend that you had to run off instead of recording this to some super important case right now. And James said, "Right, Ciaran, you're going to have to bluff your way through this thing on digital forensics, but you can talk to Heather for 30 seconds beforehand." I would say, "Heather, look, okay, genuinely, what do you mean by digital forensics? If you're asked to explain this, focus of your life's work, you're one of the foremost global experts in this field. If somebody says to you, what is digital forensics? What's it used for? Why does it matter? What do you tell them?"
What I typically start with is treating computers and phones as a crime scene. It is the best and most quiet witness, especially your phone. Your phone knows every single thing you do, how you live your life, where you go, who you talk to, what you search for. So it's the most prominent witness in any investigation.
Wow. That reassuring, scary, both depends what you're doing, who you are. Can you just say a little bit more about that? And to what extent, people will say, well, if you do this, that, or the other, it can be forensics proofs and so forth. Is it always and everywhere the case that a digital device, particularly a phone, is just this encyclopedia to what you do? Is it becoming more and more the most important thing in criminal investigations?
In most, yes. If you think back to my RSA talk in the spring, I talked about the dark periods and the lack of data. And I had to be really hush-hush because I was gag ordered at the time and couldn't talk about the Idaho murders. But in that investigation, the lack of the data was the most alarming thing because these criminals are getting smarter and they know, if you look at my desk right now, I always have to be an Android because I'm an iPhone user. But I have 3 phones that are constantly in use at all times to just create data and take everywhere with me and memorizing where things are. But these criminals are also memorizing where things are on these devices and learning ways to isolate it. But that is what is so fascinating, is when you have a pattern of behavior and it's suddenly a gap.
I love this battle between forensics and anti-forensics that happens year after year, and people coming up with new techniques and tools and ways to hide it and new places to look in the treasure trove of data structures from a forensics perspective. And I love that notion of finding evidence by looking for the gap as well. Hey, you mentioned RSA there. And look, yes, everyone, Heather talks at RSA, gets on the keynote stage because she's that good, as you could probably pick up, very articulate from the podcast already. You can still see it online, by the way.
Yep.
We'll post a link in the show notes. I'd recommend going and watching it.
Very, very good.
And look, on this occasion, you talked about the need for logging, the importance of there being data so one can do digital forensics, its importance to the world more broadly. Tell us a bit more about that talk and the kind of key message and what you were petitioning for.
It is the most stressful talk I do in the shortest delivery period every single year. So I really want each topic I talk about to be personal to me because I like to believe that I am that human touch point between the SANS panel and the people in the audience. So I want them to be frightened and actually listen to the threat. What was hard this year is I couldn't talk about my topic. So I had to get unique in this. And I reached heavily out to Ed SCOTUS and said, what could I do from the logging perspective? Like, I want this not just to be mobile, because really it was mobile and Windows-based at that point, but all of the logs too. There were other investigators looking at the gaps in the logs from his devices. And that wasn't what I was assigned to do. And that's where I got the different breach ideas and the things. And then the more I talked to people, it became very clear that you get one chance to defend your organization. I was out at a sales dinner and I remember asking the guy, hey, tell me what went wrong. How'd you guys fail? He's like, you cannot use this, Heather. And I said, I would never say your name. Your name's gone to me. Just tell me what happened. And it's the simple things, like a network was offline. Someone brought it back online. They weren't logging for everything in their environments and they were completely crushed. So I think it's also too many people have access. Not enough people monitor what's actually being logged. And leadership doesn't really understand the value of what is necessary versus what could actually crush them if a breach occurs.
Yeah, completely. And look, your comments here obviously apply to forensic reconstruction and understanding what happened. I just want to underline for folks, this is just as important, if not even maybe more important, in a breach scenario where you're rapidly trying to understand what has and is happening in your environment. Right, we often think of this logging stuff as about reconstructing and being digital Sherlock Holmes. Sometimes you're trying to do that in the moment to make a decision on what you shut down, what you contain, business resilience decisions that can have huge ramifications for an organization on whether you stem the bleeding or not. So I think your petition applies very much for those looking to protect businesses against data breaches in the moment, not just those worried about ending up in court at some point, having to defend a particular set of things that happen on a system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ciaran, you watched this talk, didn't you?
I did. Well, so let me ask you a further question about this. So I watched it. It's excellent. I love the strapline. Don't let the dark periods be the ultimate threat.
Oh, that's a T-shirt, Ciaran. That's a T-shirt.
Well, it was a T-shirt, and there's a lovely little performance surprise just after that point, which I won't ruin for those who are going to go and watch it. But given that you both violently agree with each other, and I agree too, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how to push this message in the mainstream, because it's both useful in and of itself, but it's also, I think, useful for listeners who have to deal with CEOs and boards and other leaders who won't understand this. So the way I'd put it is, if you're a cybersecurity professional and you watch your talk, Heather, you'd have to be crazy to come away from it and not understand the importance of logging and not want to be doing it if you're not already doing it in your organization in the way you're doing it. But then, and I've been in real scenarios where recommendations have come in from CISOs, from outside consultants, from people in your field saying, right, do it and do it this way. And the CEOs say, well, sure, fine, but look, it costs. It's a hassle. And frankly, why do I need this? What benefits it's going to have? Maybe I'm better off not knowing if something goes very badly wrong. So how would you translate this message, this pitch, for the non-expert, for the non-cybersecurity defender? Because ultimately, they're going to be the people writing the checks to get this capability in.
Yeah, so I spoke with Mick Douglas during the blogging aspect after RSAC, just to get some advice from his perspective on what he sees in his day-to-day work. And then I also spoke with Pierre Ledome from the cloud perspective. So I wanted on-prem, in cloud, I wanted every piece of information I could get. And some of the best advice across the board is to do purple teaming exercises. So each organization is different. What you do, how you function, what you leverage across the board is different. If you're small, logging will be a lot cheaper than if you're a giant organization. So you need to have these purple teaming exercises where you have attackers trying to get in and your defenders. And as leadership, you need to see what that outcome is. Where are the holes? And those holes need to be patched. What are you logging for that doesn't really matter? And that's where you need to take advice from each side and say, okay, we did this purple team exercise, and now we are better protected because we understand what is needed. Something I would challenge the attackers to do is try to look normal, because that's what the APT38 Bybit attack, they looked normal. And that's why the AI LLMs missed it, because it was only logging for abnormal. And again, attackers are getting smarter.
I love that. I think that's fantastic advice. And if I could boil it down in many ways, it's, look, take a multidisciplinary approach to practice across your cybersecurity team. Don't be siloed. and practice before the bad guys force you to practice. And I love that kind of purple teaming suggestion there. As a side, Heather, it must be nice as head of faculty to be able to run across to folks like Mick and Pierre. We'll put their bio links in the show notes. They also have fantastic talks and amazing content, amazing practitioners. But I love that you can kind of go and consult and get these opinions from folks.
Yeah, I've been lucky in the last 2 decades to work with really smart people, but SANS has opened up. A phone call away is an expert on any topic you can think of, which is fantastic.
Oh, it's exciting. I like the same. And often they literally wrote the tool or coined the term, which is even more amazing. But that's actually a wonderful pivot because you've literally written the book on phone forensics, for example. So case in point. And look, I want to go into some of the cases that you've been involved in later on. Remarkable stuff. But first, even for some of our cybersecurity professionals listening, they may not know the sheer power of digital forensics on a single mobile device. And they might have some misconceptions too. Like I think we all think of Android as quite flexible and lots of ways to extract data. And then we think of iOS devices, for example, as kind of solid, dense, impervious, impermeable, impassable devices where one can find nothing, which I don't think is exactly true. So what can you tell us to kind of baseline for cyber practitioners who don't work in this day to day?
All right, I'll do like a little mini speed round here of questions I'm asked.
Oh, I like it. Yes.
Fantastic.
iPhone is harder to brute force your way into, to unlock it, to get access. Android, I think, is easier. iPhone is easier to examine. So think about exactly what you said, James. Apple is so restrictive. Apple wants to control everything. They are the nosy parent in your house that says you can only go to your room and this is the way you go to your room. Whereas Android is like a free-for-all in a household. You could have chaos everywhere. So examining an iPhone where you know Apple does this, and it's always the same, so much easier than the different types of Android devices you will get. But people always think, oh, I deleted that, or oh, I removed that. And even on Android, it's like when you want to delete something, it's like, how do you want to delete it? Do you want to delete the entire app? Do you want to delete this? But then there's also, and you too can think about this on your own phones, what are you syncing with? Most people have no idea, none. So if I delete a photo from my iPhone right now, Google Cloud is so aggressive and has it. iCloud has it. My Mac will have it. My NAS in my home will have it. So there's all of these things where you delete one thing and it's really most likely living somewhere else and we try to recover it. But we really want to paint an entire picture of who a person is by looking at their phone.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, isn't it? How you mentioned 24 years earlier in the podcast, and you just think about the changes in technology over this. I remember, what I thought was my incredibly high-tech phone at the time that could access the internet with a fold-out keyboard, had MMS messages, and, simpler times, relatively simple data, not much of a digital life per se. One might get some of my very short, under 140 character messages, salacious, of course. And you think about today, all those different data stores, your OneDrives and Dropboxes and all the cloud sync tools and different apps. And of course, all the backhauling of data now for AI. God, it's just a spider web of data everywhere, which must present such an opportunity on the forensic side.
It does. It's really overwhelming, though. I think people get lost in the data.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, and you need to understand, what are you trying to answer? Because it's so easy to be like, oh, look at all this stuff. Look at these text messages. Look what he was searching for on the browser. But what are you trying to solve? And then you need to know which files are going to store that information. I worked for 3 years. 3 years. It was a woman named Crystal Rogers. Her ex-boyfriend who murdered her was just found guilty, him and his friend, in July of this year. For 3 years, working her phone just to show how it was powered off.
Wow.
And what's crazy is when they came to me, it's a 2015 case. The value in this log file was null. And they're like, Heather, what does that mean? I'm like, what?
Just trolling you.
Come on. Why does it have to be a null value? So I powered it down. That had a unique value. I let the battery die. That had a unique value. And then I was thinking about it. And I was like, this Android, you can't pull the battery. In 2015, you could pull a battery. So I called my dad and said, Dad, the FBI needs your phone. So he met me on the turnpike.
Wow.
I got his phone. I pulled the battery and dumped it. Null value.
Wow.
Heather, I got to say, if you call me and say the FBI need my phone, I'm going to have different connotations to your father.
I'm guessing you added some context here, but it does bring us, that horrific case does bring us towards how you applied this, and you've as James said in his introduction, you've been working on some of the most important and sensitive cases. I'm a bit worried about my forensics because, as James was speaking at some length, I made repeated Google searches for Osama bin Laden. And here are the results. I typed in James Line, Osama bin Laden, I got nothing. I typed in my own name, and I'm pleased to report that the Google AI overview says, and I'm quoting, "There's no known connection between Ciaran Martin, former head of the UK National Cybersecurity Centre, and Osama bin Laden." So that's good.
Forensically established truth.
I then type in Heather Barnhart, Osama bin Laden, and I get this deluge. So tell me about your, insofar as you can, because obviously I think everyone will understand that there's aspects of this, perhaps the majority of it, that you can't talk about, but you're associated with this extraordinary investigation. What is the story that you're allowed to tell about that?
It was a wild ride. I worked at the National Media Exploitation Center, and I ran the mobile device lab. I was responsible for the team of examiners. We worked very closely with all DoD. So NSA, FBI, CIA, DIA, you name it. We were working together on this. We looked for bin Laden, oh my gosh, for a good 4.5 years. For the rest of my life, I will have it memorized what he looks like from the waist down walking, how his gait is, how he holds a weapon hanging by his side. We looked at everything.
One of those moments we're glad it's an audio podcast.
Yes, yes. I will never forget standing in my kitchen, seeing on the news that Osama bin Laden was captured and killed. And I remember that day at work, we had a guy deployed from my team, and I said, he has to come home. We're out of contract money. And they're like, he cannot come home. He has to stay here for this weekend. I was like, no. We are out of contract money. He must get on that plane. And he was confused. I was confused. No one knew that they were going in that night to get bin Laden, and they needed someone there to dump all of his phones. So he was the one that was there. I was called. We had a keyword that if you got a call on the phone and they said Lucky Strike, you went right to the office. No matter what you were doing, where you were, you went straight to the office. And I remember I saw that on the news and my phone rang. I was like, yes, it's a Lucky Strike.
Wow.
And I got to go in, and he had old Nokia devices. Everyone always wants to know that. What did he have?
Right.
And what tools were used to extract? And that's where Cellebrite's like, say it was us. So it was fascinating to watch it all go down. It was also one of those things that you read that Olympians, once they win their medals, and it's all done, but they're like, now what?
Yeah.
I remember I was like, now what?
Yeah.
And sadly, they're like, well, we have ISIS and we have this. I'm like, everyone's a terrorist, sadly, but we got bin Laden. Now what? Do I move on to something different? Do I branch out in my career? But it was so exhausting and then relieving at the same time. JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, they did something so cool where they came up and they selected 5 of us and they called it the elimination of Osama bin Laden. And they gave us awards. We got books. We got this special coin, and all that is on the coin, it says Lucky Strike, and it has a star in Pakistan where he was found.
Wow.
It was so neat.
That's a cool coin.
It was really, really neat.
On the back, they should have had a Nokia 3310.
They should. His phones were terrible.
Wow.
But we had this one guy, and I love to mention this. There was this guy, Raman Arora, who worked at the company, the contract company I was at. He was an engineer. He was not cleared. So Lee, my co-author of 585, worked bin Laden's case too, which is awesome. So Lee and I would call Raman all the time and say, hey, we need you to do this thing. We can't tell you why. We need you to look at this test data. We can't tell you why. Write parsers. Raman wrote a parser that worked on bin Laden's media without even knowing it. And he was one of the 5 that got the award. And he cried so hard. He had no idea.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was so cool to see someone that just does good, not knowing why. He's an amazing human.
It's an incredible story, probably the most incredible story we ever had on this show in terms of Osama bin Laden's media. But you talked about it as an Olympic gold moment for your career, but you didn't retire after that, either literally or metaphorically.
More forensics to do.
Not in just digital forensics, but in high-profile cases. And you've been associated, you mentioned a horrific case of misogynistic violence that resulted in a murder. You've been very high-profile recently with some horrific murders in the state of Idaho. So you've stayed in the business of doing forensics on really some of the most unpleasant domestic crimes, child exploitation, murders of all different kinds. But you're dealing with some really, really horrible stuff. Given all the other options open to you with your expertise, what motivates you to do this? How does it affect you? How does it all work for you? It's an extraordinary tale.
Yeah. You know what? The how does it affect you is something my husband's really good at reminding me of things. I'll talk about Idaho in a second, but I recently was asked by the ATF and FBI to help them there was a woman accused of burning her house down with her 2 kids inside.
Right.
And they wanted health data from her iPhone showing, did she go downstairs and dump the accelerant? Did she actually get onto the roof and jump off the roof when she was on the phone with 911? And sadly, there was a note created on her iPhone with an obituary for her children 8 months before the fire. So that creation date was huge.
Wow.
And I remember just emotionally involving myself thinking, if someone's going to say I murdered my kids, they better be right. And my husband was like, hey, your job is not to say that. You're explaining the creation date of that note and what the contents were and her health data. Stay out of, did she do this or not? That's not your job. And I was like, it's a good reminder. He's like, let the data tell you. But he's so logical and I'm not. And I'm like, he's a logical man.
But that gets to the heart of this issue. You're dealing with a subject that's literally forensic. I mean, that's the word, isn't it? But it's enmeshed in this morass of human horror, individual stories and so forth. That must be a really tough thing to get involved in. And also then you have to explain it to law enforcement. You have to explain it to courts. You've increasingly, and I think this is a good thing to do, explained it on the media. So is it the sense of justice? Is it the sense of finding the guilty, exonerating the innocent? Is that what keeps you going in this? Or why do you end up in this type of very important but extremely difficult work?
That's a huge part of it for me. Anything that I can do to help the victims, those attacked, prevent it from possibly happening again or to someone else definitely keeps me motivated. But my biggest motivator, one, I want to learn. Every case I touch, I learn something. But I'm also afraid if people don't ask me for help and if I don't say yes, that the case could go the wrong direction if the data is misinterpreted. So that really makes me nervous. Think of the Idaho murders. If people said, oh, there's nothing on his phone around that time, and just left it like that, instead of saying, no. He turned off Wi-Fi 2 days before he went and murdered those 4 kids. He turned off his phone, then drove there, murdered them, and then in a panic state, accidentally turned his phone back on, which was at 100% battery power, and then turned it back off, and then called his mother when he went back to the crime scene. So those things I don't think would have been seen if you didn't know how to dig.
And this case, just for those perhaps listening from outside the US where it's been less high profile, this is in the state of Idaho. It's a guy, Brian Koberger, murders 4 young people. Does a plea deal, as I understand it. So the victims are denied the trial and the information and closure that would have come with that. But you are able not just to help stand up the case, which leads to the plea deal, and then there's a sentence of 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. But you can also then tell at least some of the story and provide some of that information and accountability that was absent from the trial. Is that a fair summary of what you were able to do in this case?
You nailed it. You nailed it, Ciaran. That was perfect.
Take up the story from there and your role in the case, because it's horrible, but it's important what you've done in this case.
So, you're in cybersecurity. Maybe you're an active CISO or a different type of cybersecurity leader, but you're looking to connect with peers to help navigate the challenges of your demanding and dynamic role. Well, the SANS CISO Network, a private community exclusively for practicing CISOs and cybersecurity leaders, could be just the place for you. You can collaborate in confidence, gain access to cutting-edge research and resources, and world-class events. So if you're ready to take your cybersecurity leadership to the next level, register to become a member of the network today by visiting sans.org/CISO-network. That's sans.org/CISO-network.
So when we first were brought into this case, it was March of 2023. And an FBI agent who's an alumni of my class called me and said, hey, any chance you're in Philly? We could use your help on something. And I was like, sure, I can pop in. So I went over and he said, it's Brian Koberger's Android and computer. And we did everything we can and we just can't find stuff. Can you take a look at it? I was like, oh, wow, this is the guy accused of Idaho murders. Yeah, I'm happy to take a look. And 2.5 years later, I'm subpoenaed to testify on behalf of his items. And I remember asking my husband, I said, do you want to work this with me? Because just different mindsets. And he's former police officer. I'm not. I'm intel. So how we look at information is completely different. But we tried to isolate ourselves from the victims families, because as I said earlier, he's very logical. Me, I get emotionally attached. I'll say too much. And he's like, you could cause a mistrial if you confuse the jury or say too much and the defense objects to anything. So he's like, Heather, just speak to the data. Since then, and him pleading, we've talked to Kaylee's dad, Steve. Kaylee's sister found me on Google and reached out to me and asked if they could ask questions because they didn't get a trial. And I never thought about what a trial would have meant for them to hear about this monster that did these things to their families. So that aspect, and I explained to the dad, listen, we tried to not become emotionally attached. We tried to just say, this is what the data shows. This is it. Because we didn't want to cause mistrial. But that's the only way mentally to protect yourself, is to isolate yourself from the emotional stories or what social media is saying. And oh my goodness, if you look at my Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it, I can't even look at it right now because some people think he didn't murder these kids and it's a conspiracy theory and that I'm feeding into it. It's crazy.
Wow.
So you can't have that constantly in your life or you'll go insane and you couldn't do this work. You have to put up a barrier.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
But, I think, firstly, thank you for doing this type of work. It clearly really matters, and any opportunity to provide closure and understanding is huge. But I think, you make a broader point here in your remarks, and then I'm going to pivot to some advice that you can share that's slightly less morbid. The impact of burden in cybersecurity is huge. You talked about the recognition of what can happen if we get something wrong technically, if we miss something, if we make a bad decision. And of course, you're here talking about a particularly severe example of that. That applies to lots of other places too, to security leaders trying to make decisions for businesses, for organizations who do important things. So in cybersecurity, yes, there's lots of patching, mundane tasks that maybe aren't sexy but really matter, but lots of this stuff has real ramifications. Lives severely impacted by fraud, protecting power utilities and water like an industrial control, and as you've shared here, actual life and limb impact. So I think that's just a hugely important thing to step back and remember as we think about the talent in cybersecurity, the people that we need, the commitment, the level of skill. This isn't just tapping away at a keyboard trying to prevent some harm-free digital crimes. This stuff is going to impact the world more and more in the years to come. But you said something really interesting that I want to pick your brain on a little bit. In series 1 of the podcast, we had what I consider several of the great explainers of cybersecurity. So Jeff White, we had Shashank Joshi, phenomenally gifted people at translating technical jargon and complex topics into something that the layman can understand. Security leaders have to do it with business individuals all the time, to their colleagues. I'm really interested if you've got any pro tips on how you take this type of subject matter and explain it to a panel of jurors or whomever else, because it is something you've had to do a lot of. Anything that security leaders might learn from your experiences?
That's a really good question. Typically, when I mentally prepare to present to the board or testify in court, no matter what it is, I try to think of how my dad will understand what I am saying.
Oh, that's good.
So if my dad can absorb it, it can be absorbed. And that was one of the hardest things with Idaho. We were going to have to talk about log files and what it means. I have the exact phone that Brian Koberger had at that time. Same Android version, AT&T network, everything was perfect for my testing. So what I intended to do was say, okay, I'm holding this phone right here. If I hold this button and power it down, that is what this log file shows. Here's here's my test one. And just walk through baby step. So you can't say, oh, if you go to ERRP, everyone's already done. They're like, what is she saying? Nobody understands it. Everyone uses a phone. If you say in your browser, even if you clear it, as you're typing things, you know that when boxes appear, it will recommend your address. It will recommend your first name, your last name. That's autofill. The stuff that this person typed into autofill is highly disturbing and shows intent on what he wanted to do to these kids. So I think just making it in a simplistic way of, oh yeah, I do that. Or I know I can download that thing. This is what it's doing. If you can explain it that way, anyone can understand it.
It's so easy to listen to this stuff and go, oh yeah, well, obviously one should do that. But I read so many reports purportedly for kind of C-level executives or kind of general non-technical folks that start with some mention to an exploit or memory corruption. And you kind of go, oh God. And I love what you've said there. And I recommend everyone listening kind of take that to heart. Think of someone in your life who's an intelligent human being, but less technical, and try to remove that jargon.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how you stepped through it and found a way to make it visual with something that they do every day. So easy to run past that as kind of, oh yeah, obviously I do that, but people don't. And I think it's hugely important. Heather, if I may, it takes a bit of a related but different direction. So you obviously have this practice you lead, kind of digital forensics and incident response, as well as one's responsibilities as head of faculty. What makes for good DFIR? Tell us about the changes over the past few years in that profession, how it overlaps with the other professions nearby. You mentioned purple teaming, so defenders and offensive. What's going on in that wonderful world at the moment that's challenging for DFIR practitioners?
It changes every single day. DFIR yesterday is different than DFIR tomorrow, which I think is great for those people that like to do puzzles and piece things together. One of the best pieces of advice that I've had, and I've heard Steve Sims say this too, you need to know how attackers and criminals think. So you need to learn those offensive measures. Recently, we had a course idea come into SANS, and someone's like, oh, this is cyber defense. Steve says, no, this is offensive operations. And I was like, no, it's definitely DFIR. Because it's all the things. It's hunting threats, which is a huge aspect now. You need to learn offensively how people are succeeding. You need to learn how to defend, which is the cyber defense. You have to learn how to investigate, which is DFIR. So I feel like we're going to see more and more classes where people are like, this is all of them. Maybe we need a special curriculum where it's across the board. It's a little bit of everything. And I think that if you back yourself into a corner and say, this is the only thing I do and this is the only thing I know, you're never going to grow. And your organizations will never grow because you need to think offensively to be able to defend and then be able to investigate.
I think that's such good advice. I know you're going to come in here,
Yes.
Ciaran. Just a super quick remark. The best lessons I've learned, reverse engineering malware, came from attacking. Like jumping across the different disciplines to gain perspective made me better in every area of cybersecurity. And I want to underline that for security leaders and team leaders and others listening. Of course, people have to have job role pathways focused around the thing they do. Finding excuses for them to cross-train, to collaborate with teams, to even take some training that's less related to their core really will enrich their capabilities in that core pursuit. I just think what Heather's saying there is so important. Okay, Ciaran, I'm going to shut up. It's your turn.
Well, I'm just conscious we're trying to railroad so much into this because so many different things we could ask you. And we've done so much specialist discussion of forensics. So got to ask you just about general threat picture, though, and then give you a chance to vent about the industry and say whatever else you like. But just on the threat picture, I mean, one of the things that you're often called upon to do is go on stage somewhere. Could be RSA in San Francisco, the biggest in the world. Could be all sorts of different places and talk about changing threats. So let's put you on the stage again. And I mean, are you in the revolutionary AI is going to kill us all space? You sometimes talk about the top trends that are affecting the threat. Where are we at this point in late 2025?
We're right back where we were my first time I stepped foot on that stage. We never learn.
Wow.
We never learn. That's the issue. I think it may have been my second or third year on the stage at the RSA conference. And I talked about old attack methods still being used.
Yeah.
The fact that old attack methods are still the key way in is mind-blowing. Yeah. When it comes to AI, oh my goodness, I like to think I am a voice of reason. I can see the power of it, but I can also see the insanity behind it. So I try to be almost the negative person sitting on the shoulder, like, what about this? And then I hop to the angel side. So I'm like the angel and the devil back and forth. But I need convincing because you see where it can cause some chaos. When I was interviewing people about AI and LLMs in their workplace and what it's doing, your AI should be trained to be a junior analyst. If your senior analysts aren't training the AI that you're using, you're missing out. And this is a huge, huge issue that you're going to come across. I heard someone say, and I love this analogy, I have been told since I was 23 years old that my job is to find the needle in the haystack. Mm-hmm. And some people are saying that improperly trained AI is throwing hay onto that haystack. So it still looks the same, but it's adding chaos because it's not properly trained. So you have to treat AI like you would a human.
That's a t-shirt with a picture, by the way. We could do that one.
We're going to have hay, and it'll be HAI.
Oh, it's so good. I like it. Available from stores near you at any moment.
Well, so cautious realism on AI and avoid the extra hay. And I mean, I think the extraordinary thing isn't the AI. It's what you said. It's the fact that we never learn and the same things are happening over and over again. Perhaps we should worry about AI after we've fixed that. James, what's next?
Well, I suppose I want to follow on from that theme a little bit, Heather. I know we joked early in the podcast. We've been at this for a moment or two, right? There's been a few years of changing technology and watching all this stuff evolve. And Ciaran asked you about the kind of technology out there, and you said we never learn. What about the industry more fundamentally? Are we making progress? Are we just adding new challenges? Are we living in the golden age of forensic tools? And I suppose what I'm really trying to get to is, could you talk a little to, you a year into the profession and offer a bit of advice on how to think about where this is going and the important things to focus on if one day young you wants to turn into, you now?
Yeah, I actually did a LinkedIn post on, I had coffee with my 20-year-old self. And it was a really cool reflection on where I was. I used to fear public speaking. I used to get hives up my neck if I had to talk in crowds.
Oh, me too.
I would never sit at the table. I didn't think that my voice mattered in rooms. So the opportunity I was given and how much I have learned in every single case I touch, I would never take that for granted. I love my job. And I think that if you love your job, it doesn't feel like work. And there are so many people I know that get the Sunday scaries when oh, it's Monday, I have to go back to work tomorrow. I never have that feeling. I love what I do, and I think it really makes a difference. And I have worked defense cases as well because the data speaks the truth. But I think when I started my career at the U.S. State Department at 22 years old, I worked with a bunch of 48-year-old cops, like male cops. And then I was in there all excited and have you guys thought about this? And what about if we do this? And I remember them saying, you're making us think differently. And that's what I think workforces need. You need all genders, all races, all age groups, because how a 23-year-old thinks and approaches data is completely different than how a 45-year-old is going to do it. What type of backgrounds do these people come from? How do they use devices? How do they use technology? How are they educated? All of these things will make everyone stronger across the board. So I think diversify, and if you were like little old me, your voice does matter. And if it's not being heard, you need to find another place to work.
That's a wonderful message. You're a passionate advocate for this stuff. And I just think, diversity of thinking to bring in multiple perspectives and look at things different ways. It's how we come up with new solutions to problems. It's how we outmaneuver the cyber criminals who, sadly, over my 20-odd years of a career, have demonstrated near boundless creativity and lateral moves every time we come up with something good. So I think that's a wonderful part of the solution to preach for. Good advice for bosses and employees alike. Look, I feel like we need another hour and a half to get through everything I want to ask you, including the most preferential method to remove things from my iPhone. But I'm afraid we're going to have to close this episode with, of course, a commitment that you can come back in the future, aren't we?
Just leave that hanging, James, that you need something hidden from your iPhone. Yeah, that's fine. Nice.
I shall call Heather later from one of the various phones lying around. I don't know which number to use, though. It's going to get very confusing.
But you can't bring it to a close yet, though, because you're forgetting.
No, of course it is. It's time for my favorite bit. There is, of course, a data pun there. I hope you appreciated it, Heather. I was going to make it a nibble or a bite.
We are going to ask Heather for
her 30-second takeaway. So, Heather, look, ultimately, this podcast is about lessons for cybersecurity leaders. You've shared some fascinating insights, some incredible stories about the impact of forensic work on the world. But we love to give people things they can take away and apply, things they could pay attention to, things they should stop paying attention to because it's hyperific nonsense. So if you had just 30 seconds with a cybersecurity leader, we'd love to hear what you'd advise them.
Just 30 seconds. I have so much to say. That's a hard one.
Most people don't stick to it, especially James.
Yes, that's sadly true. I tend to be somewhere between 37 and 67 seconds.
All right, for cybersecurity leaders, one, if you diversify your workforce, you need to be a listener. You need to listen in rooms. You need to listen to what people are seeing. You need to read what they are reporting, because anything that is happening outside of your organization can fly right back in your face and happen to you. So the way your responders work, the way they secure, the way they lock things down, you need to listen and learn.
Brevity, Ciaran.
Amazing.
I feel I've been shown up horrifically.
In content as well as concision.
In every way possible. Heather, that's fantastic. And it's been great to have you on the podcast today. It's fascinating stories. It's fantastic to have you as a member of the SANS faculty and indeed running that faculty. So looking forward to you coming back in the future. Do we have a verbal contract?
Yes, we do. This was fun.
Excellent.
There we go. We've now got forensic artifacts. We could prove it in a court of law if required.
Oh, nicely done. I'll concede that. But that is all we have time for. Heather, thank you so much for your expertise and openness. Incredible stuff. Do leave us feedback at the podcast site, or you can email us at cyberleaderspodcast@sans.org. All that remains is for me to say thank you for listening.
Indeed, thank you very much for listening today.
So keep cybering from me, Ciaran Martin.
And me, James Lyons.
Goodbye.
And remember to power off your devices and create lots of null values for Heather.